Hey gamers and game makers, welcome to the Squid Shock Gaming Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Stair, director at Squid Shock Studios. This week's guest is Alexander Kuzmanovic. Aleks is one of the members of the gaming development team Mongoose Rodeo. He's currently working on Crowsworn, an upcoming Metroidvania heavily inspired by Hollow Knight, Bloodborne, and Devil May Cry. Prior to Crowsworn, Aleks also solo developed a game called Unworthy, which is a minimalist, pixel, Souls-like Metroidvania. In this podcast, we talk about how Aleks is able to keep a cool head under pressure, tips for aspiring Metroidvania devs, and what's up with all the big noses in Crowsworn. Before we start today, I just want to quickly remind everyone that our game, Bow Path of the Teal Lotus, launches on July 17th for all major platforms. If you want to stay connected, make sure to drop us a wishlist on Steam. Links in the description. So I kind of would like to start off with a little bit of your history as a game dev, because before Crowsworn, you worked on a title called Unworthy, right? And was that your first endeavor into the gaming space?
First, and no, well, I can give the detail. Aleks, who's I guess technically my business partner, or the other half of Mongoose, or however you want to. It's my buddy. We both after finishing our engineering degrees, same universities, same program, went to work for about a year, and then we just kind of jumped ship because we weren't really feeling the vibes of the workplace. And
was it software engineering or different?
No, both civil. I was designing bridges, and he was and he was. I might be mistaken here, but he was mostly doing model analysis with software. He wasn't designing the software, but he was running the analysis, I think, for soil dynamics in I guess high seismic regions. So that's what he was doing.
So that's quite the eclectic background. Did that transfer at all to game design or game development?
Not really. I think the schooling in its own right, maybe you just got enough exposure to mathematics, and mathematics is kind of useful to. It's not the calculus is particularly useful, but linear algebra is quite useful, I would say, for programming.
Cool.
That would be the extent of it, I would say, maybe.
Yeah. So you both worked on Unworthy together?
No. No.
Okay.
I was going to we both jumped ship, and at that time we were kind of I guess I was mostly the driver of it, because for me it was I guess I kind of convinced him, because he was kind of, I think in his workplace was not unhappy but not happy, just kind of coasting, I guess, whereas me, I was quite unhappy, I suppose, with it. And when I'd get home, the time when I was who's my wife right now, but at the time she's my girlfriend, I'd come home and usually play games on the PlayStation, just to vent after going on the subway. Just man, there's two things in life that'll do something to a man. It's a League of Legends game and a subway ride. Those are the two things that'll do something to a man, I'll tell you that. So
oh, that's right. You're a League of Legends fan. Yeah, dude.
I'm not I wouldn't say a huge fan, but I dabbled. I played Dota back in the day. I was pretty into that, and then pivoted to League of Legends. But man, that stuff is I don't think you should never judge a man based on how he is after he plays a League game. It's not a
right. That kind of. I mean, League played a huge role in my life, and I spent a lot of time playing that game. It shaped me. But I am not going back to that game.
No, man.
In a serious way. Maybe I'll play casually.
There's no such thing as casual League, dude. There's no such thing.
That's true. I it seems like we're the same kind of player where we get into it. We are stubborn. We want to win, and our team, yeah. Yeah,
but I mean, I don't want to digress too much from what I was saying, but it's I think League, similar to a subway ride, is you're put in a wagon and you have to sit there for 30 minutes or however long the ride is, and it could be the most miserable ride of your life. You got to sit through it for those 30 minutes, and that's kind of where I think the similarity is. So
yeah, you're strapped in.
Yeah, you're strapped in. It's very so anyways, that was the subway stuff, I guess. And I come home, play video games, and like I said, my girlfriend at the time, wife now, was kind of just you're playing all these games, why don't you make games instead of playing them? And I was I mean, I don't know anything about it, but I'll give it a shot, look at it. And I noticed like Kickstarter games that were Kickstarters were doing quite well at the time. Mind you, forget which one I saw. I think it was Time Spinner, who was made by Bodhi Lee. At that time, made like $180,000 or something, and I was like, wow, $180,000! Like you could do a lot with that. And so it just kind of inspired me to try like approaching the video game stuff. And then Aleks and I kind of convinced him to jump in, and I was like, oh, we can do this stuff. I started dabbling with Blender, etc. And I really like Magic the Gathering, so I tried to. So we wanted to make an MMORPG TCG. Like that's obviously the colossal walk into like noob mistake, and we started going somewhere. We got some things like worked out. I think it was like reasonably impressive given how little we knew, but it was like one of those things like, you guys are crazy, like it's just not going to work out, right? And then we kind of stepped off, and I started dabbling with smaller projects. There was another game that I tried to make as a Metroidvania, had some attention in the beginning, called Runic Legacy of Sin, I think. And I kind of like spent 6 months on it and made something reasonable, did the pixel art for it. And then after that, I was like, yeah, like you just kind of felt like your code was so garbage that you were like, man, like I will not be able to finish this project. Like it was just so poor that you were kind of like, so I had to scrap the whole thing. I was, listen, I'm just going to do something completely simple, like, 2D, black and white, take the skills I have and just totally try and simplify it. And that's where I went with Unworthy, and managed to finish it in a couple of years. And yeah, it was a good learning experience.
Did Runic ship or?
No.
Okay, because I just Googled it and it seemed like I wasn't sure if it shipped. It looked like it was pretty far into development here, but actually I can see how this was a spiritual predecessor to Unworthy a little bit. But yeah. I really liked what you did. The direction, especially with the art direction that you took in Unworthy, it definitely stands out and was punchier.
I mean, it was completely utility based, right? Like it was just, I told myself like, assessing is like, I can't overexert myself. It's like I don't know how to program that well at the time. I don't know anything about pixel art. I don't know anything about art fundamentally. Like it's not like I took color theory or like any schooling or education in it. So I was like, let's strip the color and focus on the animation, because I felt like I kind of had a reasonable inclination for animation. Just, I don't know. So it's more or less like I would call it like a innate talent rather than something developed. So, I just
I did notice that. Like the animations in Unworthy were, I didn't even know that you did them. Because I assumed that you were more on the technical side rather than the creative side.
No, I did everything on Unworthy, yeah. Like except for the sound and music.
Right, that makes sense, because I knew you were a solo developer, but somehow I didn't connect the dots, because the animations are quite like advanced for someone who doesn't have any background. So I guess what you said about having an innate talent, that's definitely there. And I'm sure you're kind of directing. Are you doing some of the animations for Crowsworn too, or just more
I was, until we got David or Lubello Lub, who's basically took over to do all the animations, just because I kind of like had to. But everything up when we presented the Kickstarter, like all the animations that were shown in the Kickstarter were done by me. Like, so everything that was up to that point. Then after that, we pivoted. Yeah.
Well, that's super impressive, dude. Yeah.
Yeah, like I can still do the animation. I just don't have the time, is what it comes down to.
Yeah, when you step, I know exactly how you feel once you like kind of step into that more of managerial director role. Like, it just becomes impossible to do the like minutia of anything else on the team. It's just like all planning, all task delegation.
Yeah. Kind of, except the only thing I do like full force, just because I'm not convinced I'd know how to find someone. It's just like, doing an animation or whatever. It's like reasonably, where art is like reasonably, how would I say it? It's like easy to convey and easy to evaluate the quality of. Do you know what I mean? Like there's really not that much to assess. Whereas the level design, for example, that's like something that's more of like an abstract skill, I would say. And I wouldn't feel comfortable finding somebody for that, for example. So that's like the thing I do now, is like the level design. And then I just like, I design the enemies and stuff too, but like that's kind of like a back and forth. You can sort of like fine tune that into it. Whereas like a level like the whole world depends on itself. So it's not like you can just kind of like take an element and tweak it, right? Like the whole thing kind of has to collapse on itself to work out nicely.
Based on all that, and of course, like on smaller teams, you have to assume so many duties. Do you have a title that you go under, or is that still
Nah,
under construction?
yeah, no, not really. I mean, only if I'm signing contracts to ever put a title, but other than that, like not really. I mean, I don't. I'm
It's
not a,
tough, right? Yeah.
I just don't like. I don't know. I'm not a. I don't know. I just don't like titles personally. Like it's kind of weird. It's like for me. I don't know. Like what would you do? Like
Yeah,
you know.
I'm the same. Like I've changed the title so many times. Like at this point, it's just game director. I think like that's enough. I don't really care. Cool. Yeah. So jumping, making that step from Unworthy. How many years was it before you came up with a concept for Crowsworn? Like after release of Unworthy,
Uh,
or maybe not years, but
yeah, it's hard. It's. I mean, yeah, this is a bit more. I mean, I don't mind talking about it, but it's a bit more of like a personal kind of event that happened. Like it was. It's all got a bit hazy because like I never really like I released Unworthy and it was a complete game, but I never did the like post launch duties that I would have envisioned and thought I would have done. Just because like I think literally like a month after I launched, it was like found that my mom was like diagnosed with like a exceptionally like rare like form of cancer, and then I was kind of like taking care of her for 6 months, and then she passed eventually. So it was like after that, I was just kind of like down for the count for about a year, I would say. Like so, it wasn't like I really developed anything or any ideas, and then later it was just kind of somehow just like wiggled into it, I guess.
I can
Yeah,
imagine.
yeah.
No, yeah, that's. I'm sorry to hear about that, and I can imagine that sounds like such a difficult experience to have, especially right after releasing kind of your first project. You're kind of riding a little bit of a high, and then something like that happens, and you kind of go through a period of grief and a little bit of like just emotional funk, and you feel a little lost. At what point did you say, or like work up enough courage to say like, okay, I'm gonna do this all over again for a second time, making a game?
I'm trying to figure out how to even like explain that because I had this talk like before with people. It's like I don't know if it was gradual because I was already like in talks with Aleks at the time, like just before that about like getting a grant at the time because our government like issues grants for like game dev things, and it was like now that you had like experience, we could apply for one and see if we could get it and like do something. So we were kind of like already like doing something. I guess it's just like um I wasn't in it because I was like, like I said, I was just kind of like out for the count. So I was exceptionally like slow to work through it, and it was just kind of like finagling and trying to. I mean, it wasn't like I'm trying to think like it was more like as an idea of like like this kind of like shitty stuff sort of happen in life, and you're kind of like you realize you can't just like sit there idle, right? Like so you need to like do something about it, like and it's just like getting yourself to like do something other than like stewing in like thoughts that aren't particularly healthy is kind of how I approached it. And it was I think, but to be perfectly honest, like the big pivot where I finally got over it, and not over it but like I guess reconciled with my emotions or whatever would I think it wasn't like gradual, it was more just like I can't pinpoint like a date, but it was like a very like like linear and like a pop off, like almost like an awakening or something. Like I don't know how to explain it really. So I wouldn't say it was like gradual, but it took a while to just kind of, like I said, it's just like I think at a certain point you come to a realization, right? Like there's two ways you can go with like things when things like that happen to you in life, right? Like you can either kind of like go in the hole or you can get out of the hole, right? Like there's really no other ways about it. And the one element of it is like I'm not trying to. I hope this isn't like read in the wrong way to like somehow tarnish like the memory of my mother or whatever. But it's just like in its own right, an experience like that I found upon me for like reflection at that moment when I hit it is like it's exceptionally like liberating in the sense that like you've kind of like faced like your worst like thing, one of the worst things you could have envisioned, right? And you kind of like made through it. So it's like after that, like nothing is really like things that would have been like I would have been hesitant about or like worried me more, like really don't at this point. It's like almost like it's
Yeah, it
yeah,
shifted your
you're just
perspective.
like
Yeah.
completely right because you just like
Other
it's like
problems seem so small and it like
right,
just so, but relatively. Yeah, I totally get that. And you mentioned like, you can stay in the hole or climb out. It sounds
yeah,
like if you haven't already exited the hole, you're definitely like making a lot of headway out of that hole. I don't want to like make an assumption of like where you are in that process, but like I think with your new project Crowsworn and like everything that's going on, I mean, it can be super challenging and stressful and stuff, but like what you're doing is like really amazing. So congrats on like all the success. And I kind of wanted to talk about how that felt at the time because it was quite a shift from I think where Unworthy was to the amount of attention that like Crowsworn got on like the Kickstarter and stuff. So at that time in your life, how did that affect you? Because it was a fast, rapid rise, I feel like, and it achieved a lot of success, and the hype is still going. The longevity of that hype is quite impressive. So um, I'm just curious about like how you dealt with that because it's not something that happens to many people. It's a really rare thing. Yeah.
to be perfectly honest, I don't feel like there was anything to like per se deal with. I would say the one thing is just like always sort of I try to like even tell everyone on the team like exactly as you put it, to be like mindful of the privileged position that you're sort of in, including the people that are working on it. I also thought to like remind Aleks because he didn't really have like Unworthy experience or something, like he never made a smaller game, so he doesn't really know like the tiers, for example, of like where you can end up with. Like this is his like kind of first ride. So that,
First
this is
rodeo.
like right. This is like yeah. So this is his like first thing. So you go into it, and I'm like this isn't. I try to explain this isn't normal. This is like a statistical anomaly. I even talked to like good friend of ours like Eric Baroni, the Stardew Valley guy. And we've had discussions with him, and I've been like, Eric, like even putting it out front, like even Stardew Valley, as big as it is now, during its development, I don't think you ever had the privilege of kind of like knowing that it was going to be a hit, right? Like there was always that uncertainty or whatever, and he's always put it like you guys kind of got like the starter pack, or if you want to call it, right? Because there's like there's a lot of stress off your shoulders because you just know you just have to make a good game at this point, right? But I
Okay.
feel a lot of
So
games. Hmm.
you can continue. Sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, but I feel like there's a lot of games that they could be good, but it's sometimes just difficult to like for whatever reason guarantee visibility or success or whatever it is. And it's like I often think like investing a lot of time to make a video game is quite it takes a lot of bravery or a lot of insanity, like one of the two, right? Like unless you're in a particular position, because it's like at the end of the day, you're investing years of your life for something that you have no idea like what's going to happen at the end of it. Oftentimes, that's the case for developers, right? So it's like, I don't believe it's gambling or like luck necessarily, because I feel like you have agency in making a quality game and taking it upon yourself. But like I said, I think that's the part where we don't have to stress about those things. So I'm grateful for those. That's what I was going to say. We're kind of like grateful to the backers, to the people behind it, and never taking it for granted what we have. But at the same time, I don't think there was anything to like, again, per se deal with because, um,
Well, you mentioned like a lot of stress being lifted, right, off your shoulders because, like, okay, we're fine. The number one thing for a lot of indie studios is just like we don't have money,
right,
and that's kind of like the first glass ceiling that you have to bust through
right.
for many people, and a lot of people don't make it past that point. Um, so you said the stress was lifted. You felt like you had all of the accoutrement to like help you make this game, but I'm wondering if a different kind of stress from a different area or a different kind of anxiety manifested during that time.
Well, I mean, and again to say like it's just so it's not misinterpreted. I wouldn't say even that like stress was lifted. Um, because again, like I honestly mean this. Like after like the experience with my mom, like genuinely, like I said, it was like a liberating thing in my head. Like I don't really feel stress per se anymore, or like any concerns about things, because like I said, it's like reflecting on it, like who cares? Like I've gone like to the pits and back, so it doesn't really matter. Um,
It's interesting
so
you bring that up because like in I constantly have to remind myself is like we're making a video game. It's supposed to be fun and it's a medium through which we make people smile, have fun, have good experiences. At the end of the day, it's not serious.
right,
Um, you know, get lost in my own head so much about like worrying about like what people are gonna think and like
yeah,
this is life or death kind of thing, right? But
yeah. And like I'd say, like yeah, those are kind of things I don't really honestly stress about. But to be fair, it's not like I don't get like worked up and like stressed and perhaps like angry or something when we're working, because it's like I do still have goals and expectations, and I'm kind of like I can be intense at times, but that's different than like the stress of like, oh man, is this going to work out, or like that kind of like fear type stress. Like that's the kind I don't feel. But it's not like I don't feel like like adrenaline and stress in the nature, like okay, we got to get this done, we got to put this together, like those things still happen. But it's not like it's not out of like concerns for something. It's just
like you just want to follow through on your word of like creating
yeah,
this game and they're
yeah, follow through on the word, and not like not not leave like leave it all on the table, like leave it all out there, right? Like when you're done this game, say you did the best you could, like you hauled ass as much as you could. There's nothing you could have done more or better. Like you didn't cut any corners, you were transparent with the people who backed it. Like I don't know.
yeah. Do you think that's achievable? Because like from my point of view, I'm gonna we're gonna release soon, right? I'm gonna be like reading comments and feedback from people, and they're gonna say, "Oh, this area is a little weak. This art seems a little off, or whatever." And I'm gonna think, man, if I didn't sleep in that one day, I could have fixed this, and it would have been better, right? So like I don't, the way I work is like, and it's probably not healthy. Is just like it's never enough, and I can't like ever feel good about the amount of time I invested, even though we were doing like 80-hour weeks, like
Okay.
for the majority of development. So I wonder if you think that like you think that's like something that is achievable to feel like you put it all on the table and invested.
Um. Well, I guess. I think for us it should be, because there's no like limiting factor, right? Like I understand if you have a deadline that you need to like, that's where it becomes a little hazy or messy. Like if you have deadlines or mandates or whatever it is, then it's like, yeah, maybe not, because you just have to release it. But like I said, for us, the goal is just like, do everything to the point where you look at it and you're like, I can't do anything like,
Yeah.
else. Like that, just like, I can't do anything better. This is it. Like I'm satisfied with it. This is the best that like, um,
Yeah.
we can do whatever it is.
It's a
But
strange ethereal problem. Yeah, and I
so,
don't expect you to have an answer for it, but like I
well, for answer for what
just
was
want
it? Which question though? Was it like,
or like if you think if you think it's truly possible to like feel at the end of the day like you put 100% of your effort in.
yeah?
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I mean, if like I said, if you have if you have the time, then yeah, I do think so. But it's like I said, like I don't know, maybe you guys like for your position, like, or if somebody told me, you have to release on Crowsworn like a year, then I'd say like no, I can't like ensure that, because it's like I don't know if I have the time to do it. I don't know, like you said, maybe it's like, oh, I slept in, I should have put in more time in this like window, but otherwise, you cook until it's done, right, kind of thing.
Right. Okay. I see your position is the position you're in. Yeah, maybe is a little different than our position because you're self-publishing technically, right?
Yeah,
Because I always felt a certain amount of time pressure. Once we
yeah.
started working with our publisher.
Well, like I said, that's like what I remind sometimes, you know, the guys like from the experience, like you're privileged in the position that you can operate this way, right? But the downside of it is the fire that should be under your ass is never quite as hot as it should be. That's the only downside of operating like this. That's my opinion, anyways.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely a give and take, or a trade-off rather, because I definitely felt the fire lit under my ass and got like, I went beast mode and like was
Yeah,
able to do things that I never
nice and
thought I would be
crispy.
able to do. Yeah, nice and crispy, nice and toasted.
Yeah,
Yeah, and it definitely can produce really. It could produce it. I think at the end of the day, it produces a different product for sure, but a different from what I would be able to create if I had an unlimited amount of time,
yeah,
because it forces you to like make decisions and kind of pursue and
yeah,
commit. Yeah. So I
yeah.
think, yeah, there's trade-offs.
Mhm. There's
I
a
think
healthy
I work,
balance.
yeah, and I think I work better with the fire under my ass like method.
Yeah.
So I kind of wanted to talk about your team a little bit, because in the beginning it was just you and the other Alex, right? And how did
Me, Alex, and Derek. So, Alex, I knew from university, and we worked once before we kind of like went separately after the MMORPG thing didn't work out. And then what we did was we applied for a grant. There's like this thing that in our province they do. It's like it's called Ontario Creates, I believe. In fact, you'll probably see their logo in our like credits section in the game if you ever do look at the credits section, because it's like one of the things that you have to do with them. Um, and they have a bunch of like different grants you can apply for. One of them is like a concept definition phase, as they call it, which is basically like building a demo prototype. So there's like this really really old Crowsworn version demo that was, and they basically applied for and we got, and it's like 50,000 Canadian that you get for it. The caveat being with these grants is like all of the money has to be spent within, I don't know, is it, I don't know if it's, I don't know if it's within Canada or within the province. I can't even remember. But basically, they want to keep the money within the system, right? Like the idea is that you create jobs for the local economy. I can't remember if it's like the country or province at this point in time. But basically, we got that, and the 50K that we got was basically like the idea was to, I guess, just finance ourselves to work on it at the time. I don't even think we ever ended up paying ourselves from it, though, to be honest. But that's how we got it, and it was just kind of like to justify doing the work. So we made a demo. I don't even think it had a boss, if I remember correctly. And the Crowsworn guy looked like way different at the time. The art was all done by me, including the background art, the enemies, like everything. It was like way more like not good, I guess.
have you
Um,
have you showed that off before? Has anyone seen that like
I don't,
publicly?
I don't think so. I don't remember. Maybe like early days on Twitter. I have no idea.
I'm kind of
Um,
curious to see where it started, because there's there was Hungry Night, and I thought that was super interesting. How that evolved into Hollow Knight. It'd be interesting to see the early prototypical stuff for Crowsworn. But yeah.
well, yeah, it was just like a lot like less. I'd say like the environment art was a lot less like serious in the sense like just like like kind of quality. It was more like it had a quirkiness to it that I don't think it was like bad looking, but it wasn't as good as it is now. I don't know. That's like my
Wasn't
opinion,
as
anyways.
moody or polished or like,
Yeah,
I guess
I,
in
I,
a
I
sense professional, like.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I can, since it's not me doing the works, I feel like I can, glaze him as much as I need to. But like, I think Derek, like the quality of the stuff that he like produces, like level of detailed environmental art is like insane.
Yeah, the environment stuff you guys are posting on Twitter or wherever, I'm always just like, whoa, this is top tier shit. Like,
Yeah, just
I
one
love
guy
it.
doing it too, which is crazy. He's like a young guy, and he's just like hyper like talented, like just like God given talent to do this kind of stuff. And I'm like, kudos to you,
And his
man.
name is Derek, you said?
Yeah.
Okay. I might be going off track here, but like, so you got that money, and then at some point you realized there was maybe some gaps that needed to be filled. One of them
Well,
being maybe environmental art, or and how to.
it was just like the getting it done. Like we did this demo, and it's like 50. 50K when you get Canadian to spend within Canada, like let's be really, it's really hard to make a game for 50,000,
Yeah.
dollars, and it's always kind of funny. That's the one thing I'll say. Like, kudos to guys that get it done, but it's like even like not to make it sound like shitty, but even like $1,000,000 is really easy to spend when you're making a video game. Like, it is really easy to burn through $1,000,000. So I'm not saying we burned through it, but I'm just saying like it definitely isn't. Like sometimes I see
as much as the average person might think. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, like
no idea. Yeah.
Yeah, and I even say like Alex and myself, like we don't pay ourselves a penny from the Kickstarter money. So we're like ensuring everyone else kind of gets covered, because I got myself sort of like covered with the residual earnings from like Unworthy and just other stuff in life, investments and things. So I'm kind of okay sitting on it. But so, and even then, I mean, imagine that it's like we're still like not even taking money for ourselves, and it's still like you can still spend it. So. Anyways, I digressed a bit there, but yeah, so we got this demo, and then after that, there was another grant thing, which is like you apply for the like full production grant, which is like to actually complete a game. And you're supposed to complete it within 2 years after you get the grant or something. Like, that's the life cycle of it. And that one's a maximum of like 250,000 Canadian that you get. So
it has a stipulation of you need to ship in 2 years.
Correct.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So that was kind of off the table for you, or?
No, we did it.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, we did it, but it's kind of like, again, putting it out there. It's interesting when your game, I guess, like Kickstarter success and other kind of success, all of a sudden, like, rules don't really apply to you anymore. Like, everyone's like, like, you guys have already kind of like been more successful than most of the games that do ship like in 2 years do anyway. So it's like, like, you guys are cool. Just like keep us in on the boat. Like,
okay, that's great that they were able to. Because usually, those kind of things, like especially with the governments and stuff, they just don't budge.
Well, no, yeah, but it's like the angle that they were approaching with us is they're like, well, if they just want to know what our finances are like later, I guess, to show them like how much it costs to make a game, because then later, if the game is successful and they can like look at it and be like, this is like one of the anomalies of a successful indie game, then they can then bring it up to like their higher ups and be like, hey, like, games actually take more money to make, so maybe we can make these grants actually higher, because like, it turns out teams need like more, and stuff like that. So they're like interested in getting the full picture of how the money was spent, like how much it actually costs to make a game, and that's kind of like the angle of like the trade-off. And they're just like happy that like
make some accommodations for you, tweak the agreement. Yeah, I mean that's really smart of them. Like, honestly, if they didn't do that, I just have no faith in like all the red tape and bureaucracy and government. Like, it is such an obvious thing to do. Like, when you see a game like the one you're making, and understanding that it just needs more time to bake, like, and then it'll be a better product because of that. It'll make you look good as an investor, etc. Cool. So I guess your budget started increasing, and you're like, okay, it does not make sense to just have us three working on the game anymore, perhaps.
Well, it was like I said, when we got the 250K from there, we were like, okay, like, we need to finish this game, and us two alone isn't going to work, and we need better environment art, so let's find somebody to do environment art. Then we brought Derek on board to do environment art, and then we did the Kickstarter, and then after that success, we were like, dude, there's no way we're going to spend this money in like a year or something, right, to like produce a game, right? So it's like, okay, like, the game's got to be bigger. We got to make this like meet expectations. Like, it also is like we definitely have like all this capital to work with now, so like, let's make a damn good game. And but at the same time, we can't really like get too many cooks in the kitchen, if you would. We have like a close-knit team where everyone's got their like role and it's good at it, and I don't really want to like, well, we need another environment artist so we can do an extra area, because then all that like like the magic kind of leaves. That's how I feel.
I just watched the video. It said like the 10 people can do the work of 7 people. And it kind of exponentially increases like the more people you add onto a team. So it's just like, it's not about how many people, it's just about, I guess, how the team works together. And so you mentioned Derek joined the team. How did he join the team? Did you scout him out or?
Well, I already like when I was working on Unworthy, I was kind of like scouting out all the pixel artist guys and things like that. Like you're always looking on Twitter, so I already kind of like knew of him slightly. But I made friends with some guys in the industry. I don't even know how, dude. Just like run into people. So I met a friend of mine, Cannon Breed, Alex McDonald, who's I think he's McDonald. That's what it says on Twitter. I never asked, but I know he's Alexander at the very least, and he's like an Aussie. I don't know if he's in Australia right now, but he does like pixel art. He's done pixel art for a lot of like indie games and stuff like Death's Gambit, Duelist, things like this. And then he knew Derek somehow, and then he was like, "Hey, like maybe talk to Derek." And I talked to Derek, and Derek actually turns out like lives in my city. So I was like, "Well, okay, like what are the odds of that?" But all right, let's like meet at a cafe and just like talk about it and see if you want to try this thing. And we worked it out, and he was looking for like permanent work of some nature, applying to a few other studios, and then managed to get him to work with us. And it's kind of funny because he almost like worked for another studio. I won't say the name here, also in our local area, but like they were like lowballing him, so he didn't take the job, which is like lucky for me, I guess, because I always tell Derek, I'm like, yeah, like I don't think there's a lot of guys that can do what you do. So like the fact that these guys like lowballed you, like totally like they cut themselves, in my opinion.
Yeah. You saw something in him, and
Yeah.
you were like, yeah. I mean, it seems like pretty serendipitous that this guy just so happens to live in your city, and he's such a killer
Yeah.
environmental artist. I'm sure he does.
Yeah. I mean, but I would say like if Derek listens to this later, I'm sure he won't like be upset about me saying this. That my opinion was the one thing that like maybe if he was applying to other jobs that would have that what people didn't want to, I guess, like invest the time. Like it's clear that he's got like artistic talent, but in terms of like asset production and fitting into the pipeline of like producing things for a game, that's where like I think some work needed to be like wiggled with. And we spent a lot of time back and forth, probably like 6 months, not really like producing at the rate that things are going with now, or like things, just because it's like he's never done that kind of thing before. And frankly, I've never managed or like worked with somebody to do something like that, right? Like I made it my own kind of game inside Game Maker, which is also like a very different process. You're just kind of like slapping sprites as you go in there. And then it was like this like learning thing. But a lot of people in the industry don't want to invest like time. They just want like guys that are already like
right. And
like, trained or whatever, which is, I think you miss out on a lot of good people sometimes if you take that approach. But
absolutely, that is really important to like note there. Like, I guess as you had your small team, you're kind of in charge, right? You're able to just be like, hey, you want to go out for coffee with whoever without having to go all the red tape, go through HR, whatever it is, and be like, you're good. I don't want to complicate this too much. I see something in you. It doesn't really matter to me that you have the exact technical experience for this exact art asset implementation or whatever. But hey, like, we can make it work, especially if like you kind of vibed with him, which I imagine you did, like on a personal level.
I mean, it was hard to say at the beginning. I didn't like not vibe with her, but it wasn't like we're like, oh man, like we're best bros at the beginning. He's a little bit like there's also an age gap there, right? Like I'm 36, I'm 36 or 35 or 36, I can't remember anymore, and he's 22, 23, 24 or something. So
Oh wow.
so it's like it's a little bit of that, like it's not huge, but
It's kind of crazy how similar like you and I are, because I started the game doing all the art and animations, coding in the beginning, and then the team joined. And then my Derek is a guy named Aleks. He's from Chile. And, he's I think he's 21 or 22 also. I'm 34. So there's that age gap. He's pretty green, but he was doing fan art for us in the Discord very early on during the Kickstarter. And this guy was just pumping out like piece after piece after piece. And I'm like, dude. And he was working a job too at the same time. I'm just like, wow. And then we worked on this communal piece with the community, and someone would type, hey, I think we need some like food sprites for this image. 10 minutes later, he comes out with this fully rendered, like stylized piece. And I'm just like, at that moment, I knew this guy is a machine. He's like an absolute monster when it comes to like creativity, producing art quickly and of quality. And I just knew that I wanted to work with him. So that's
Yeah.
kind of how we got him on. But yeah, he had zero experience with game dev or like
Yeah.
implementing assets and stuff. But yeah, we learned along the way. So yeah, it took a while, but eventually it got to a point where we gelled. So
Yeah.
yeah, I just thought it was
No,
interesting how.
yeah. For us, that similarity was we had a guy, David Lubello Lub, who did some fan art and stuff after the Kickstarter, and then I like looked at his Twitter, and then he does like fan art, like Hollow Knight animations and stuff too. And I was just like looking, I'm like, this kid's like pretty good, right? And I was like, I didn't even know who he was or age, and I just like asked him if he wanted to, if you wanted a job to like do the animations, because I was like, yeah, this guy can do what we need, I think. Or
Oh,
Elden Ring.
this guy! I've seen this guy. I had no idea he worked with you.
Yeah,
But yeah,
he does all the animations now. Yeah,
he did the Elden Ring. If Elden Ring was if the Elden Ring bosses were in Hollow Knight,
yeah.
yeah, this thing went mega viral. I loved this.
So he started doing the animations for us. Same kind of story though. To beginning with, it was kind of like took a while, a little bit, not too much to like wiggle him into it. And it's kind of funny because some of the animations they did earlier, we had actually ended up like redoing lately because. I'm just gonna be. This is my opinion. Like when we first started, I felt I was the better animator, and then over time, like he's just been doing like churning out animations, and I've been kind of like giving him some like animation principle ideas here or there, and I go over like his animations. And at this point, I'm like, I can comfortably say he's like better at it than I am. So, uh, so that's like another thing out of there. But yeah, it took a while to also like wiggle him in on it.
Yeah, well, when you mentioned that, I thought of like that when you're making a game, you're constantly like looking at older stuff and being like, okay, this is actually not up to par anymore. Has
Right.
that happened for you? Like
A little bit, but it hasn't for well. I mean, obviously the first time around when we did that big pivot, but like it's been pretty good for the most part now. Like, yeah, it's been pretty good. So it
yeah,
hasn't
now
been
you kind of
it hasn't been a while.
understand more deeply about the standard,
Yeah,
and you've just been following that. Yeah, I think we can start wrapping up, but I did have like one kind of interesting question that
sure.
someone on is that Nine Finger Games asked on Twitter is what's up with the obsession with big noses? Like where does that like characteristic and like the enemy designs and stuff come from?
Well, I mean, I'll go to details of what's going on specifically. There's like lore kind of elements to some of the stuff, like what's going on there. It's not particularly just noses, but it's like one of the things for me, at least, like when I'm designing characters, I find like the nose is one of the, for whatever reason, things that if you like mold it a certain way, it really creates that like uncanny, unsettling quality. There's something about like noses. I don't know. It's just like something I realized. Like if you like mold them a certain way, there's like it doesn't even necessarily have to be horror or whatever it is. It's just like something when you look at it, most people like it's just like kind of like oddly unsettling. Like
Ah, I see. Yeah, and it
and
does.
that's like where the desire to like create like groups of characters that have that kind of thing goes from. But there's other stuff in the game too. It's just like for me, yeah, for me, one of my goals with like enemy character design is often to like make them as, again, not as scary as possible, but just like unsettling as possible.
Yeah,
With still within a frame where it's not like Crowsworn does have that art style where it's not like Resident Evil, like some kind of high tier horror. Like you can really leverage that kind of thing. It's still got that like sort of, just by nature of it. Like I don't want to say it's cute. It's not cute, but it's like, you know what I mean. You're kind of working that medium where you can't really like push. It's not like Bloodborne, like that type of fidelity of
yeah.
art.
That's
So
one of
kind
your
of work.
strengths too, and the juxtaposition of like, let's say a more cartoony
Yeah,
style. I wouldn't call it cartoony, but you know what I mean.
yeah, I
With
do.
that dark, moody, kind of unsettling atmosphere, that is a really strong combination. I have another a question related to
Okay.
that. Is like, besides games, like, what were there any cartoons, anime, movies, books that kind of inspired the game?
Uh, yeah, it's like ideas. Like I guess it's like some people. like point out and truly kind of, it's almost like too lenient, but it's like so okay, it's games again. It's like we said, Devil May Cry is in there, but like the anime is for me one of the ones that I like and be obviously in there is like Hellsing.
Helsing.
Hellsing, if you look at it, like, oh, that looks like the Crow guy, but it's like the Crow guy
Helsing.
also kind of looks like Dante as well, and it's just like this motif, but like the guns are kind of like
Oh,
so. But Hellsing is like, um, I like Hellsing because he's not a hero. He's like it's like an anti-hero, right? Like the guy in the thing, he's not like a he's kind of he's like an anti-hero, right? And the guy's always
yeah.
like on a total like power trip. Like the whole thing is just like one giant power trip. So it's kind of um, yeah, that was one of the animes, I guess. Um, but yeah, other than that, it's always pointed out. I think like style wise, inspired by Devil May Cry. In terms of like setting, probably Bloodborne. In terms of like again, I always say like the biggest inspiration with the Hollow Knight stuff. Some people say it's like the art. It's, yeah, but I say the biggest one is design sensibilities. That's like for me what Hollow Knight was a big, um, like an eye opener when I played it was like just the level of like condensed, simplified, like just design sensibilities. Like don't do anything like too much. Just like focus on the tried, true, simple, and like execute on them well. Like it was kind of refreshing to just see like you guys didn't like do anything revolutionary per se, but everything you did was like so just like cut the bullshit and like focus on the good. You know what I mean? Like that's what it was. It was just like cut the and do it really well.
This is a question from the dev of Lone Fungus 2. I'm going to kind of reword this because it's a little general, but like, what is like one tip for people who are making Metroidvanias? Because like it's becoming a very popular genre to pursue as a first time game developer for whatever reason, even though it's probably not recommended. Do you have
Yeah,
any like bite sized, like one thing that you've learned along the way, tip that you could possibly give people?
this I'm gonna pivot a bit, but then I'll come back to it. It's just sort of like draws on like I'm just gonna share a brief experience. Like my neighbor who actually is like I guess you could say a professor at a college teaching like game dev in my city, London here. Like invited me to like go check some students' work out over there, and then they presented like animation and games and things. And then the industry guys, there was like a bunch of industry people that came in, and they all gave me criticism for these games. And to me, I don't want to be like an a-hole, but like I was looking at it and I was like thinking to myself, the craziest part about this criticism that they're providing is nobody ever really identified what the fundamental goal of the project was to begin with, right? Like, and I don't know why you're providing like criticism. Like somebody was like, "Oh, make sure your UI has like rainbow colors because players never pay attention to this." And they look at this and I'm like, "Why the heck are we talking about UI? Why are we talking about this? Like, what is the goal here? Because like, are we talking about these? Are you trying to make commercial products? Like, are you trying to make money off this? Is this a passion project? Like, what are the goals?" And then I can tell you like where I think your biggest deficiencies or where it might be worthwhile to put focus in to achieve said goal. But if I'm providing you this feedback and you're telling me like I don't really care, this is a passion project, like I just wanted to like have fun and explore my creative sensibilities, and I'm like, well, why am I telling you about like UI prompts or whatever, right? So it kind of comes back to the same thing with like that question. I kind of stuck at it because the question ends up being like, hey, like what's your level of experience? What are you trying to make out of this first? Are you very experienced? Are you trying to make a commercial product? What happened? What are your particular strengths that you have? Like, there's all these things. So it's like, I don't really know like what you would give as a answer to like, what's a tip for um, making a Metroidvania. Cause, assuming you have all the like skill sets to do good like level design and understand like the ebbs and flows of like Metroidvanias, like where to place enemies, how to differentiate rooms that need like breaks versus ones that have a high intensity action, uh, just reasonable distribution. If you're like a first time complete newbie, the one thing I would say is maybe spend some time just doing like something super small, and then after you understand like the nitty gritty little bits of like the cookie bits of how to put it together, play a Metroidvania, a good one, whether that be like Symphony of Night, whether it be like Hollow Knight, whether it be Bow Path of Teal Lotus, whatever it ends up being, like play it and then play it slow. Like go into every room at like as a pace and try to think what was the intent behind this and why was it played, and then also then play it normally and then find out when, like, really observe when you're like, fuck, like, I don't want to play this game anymore or whatever it is. Like, observe those moments too, and then try to compartmentalize why that happened to you, and then go back and reflect on it, and then incorporate that into something. That's all I would kind of say, because it is like a bit of a nebulous question, but like, and it's like, are you trying to make like a great Metroidvania, or you're just trying to make one that kind of like works? Like, you know?
Well, Alex, I think that's actually a really good answer. But to summarize, you said like to make a good a tip for making a Metroidvania is to play one actively and intentionally, and kind of see what the purpose behind a certain room was, or the certain like motivation behind pacing something this way. Yeah, it's just like you learn from the references, the greats, right? You learn how to write a good book by reading good authors, right? But kind of actively, and like not just trying to rush through it or passively, but just like really look at thing with a kind of a deeper analysis. Just real quick, you don't have to like go into too much detail, but I always like to ask if there's a game that you think needs more attention right now, that's kind of maybe underrated or not getting attention for whatever reason. It could be in development or game you've played recently.
Oh, okay. And I'm not shilling for you, but like I was genuine when I said it before. I think like when Bow comes out, I think people should really like give that one a shot, because in my opinion, like you know how far I got in the demo that you sent me, and it's like, it's not like I quit games pretty fast when I don't like them, so I'm like a tough guy to have stick around that long. So I think like Bow, to me, it was one of those games that like when I played the demo, I was like, it's better than what I expected, and take that for whatever you will out of it. I mean, that's positive, but like 99 out of 100 times, games are worse than I expected.
Right. Yeah, I know what you mean. And I agree that I also am of the opinion that Bow is better than I expected as well. Yeah, I think
it's fun. It's actually fun. It's like it's actually fun to move around, play through. Like it's just enjoyable to like go through. Like, yeah, it's just like fun. I don't know what to say. It's like, I wouldn't like, it's also not like the same kind of thing as like Hollow Knight, but it's just like, it's fun to like bounce around. Like you really get a lot of like airtime in it, like floating around, which is like something different. It almost feels like the opposite of Unworthy, where in Unworthy you're like grounded all the time, and Boy, I feel like you're 99% of the time you're in the air floating around doing something. Like, it just feels that way to me.
Yeah, and I can't wait to see when people act like actually talented like video gamers like get a hold of it and to see what they can do with the player controller. Yeah, well, thanks for the.
This wasn't a paid promotion, by the way.
Not paid. But yeah, thanks for that, man. That really means a lot, and that makes me feel good about going to release. So, and
I hope you guys get the like eyes on it that you could and should. But yeah, I think the game is it's just fun. Like I mean, that's not like it's kind of, yeah. I hope that's not undersold.
That's what we were shooting for.
Yeah,
that's what
a lot of games aren't fun, man.
Yes, yeah. That if I had one advice for gamers is like, is your game fun? If not, start pursuing that a little bit harder.
Yeah.
Okay. Like, yeah, games are supposed to be fun and enjoyable. So that's kind of my mantra. And thanks again for joining, Aleks, and hope to have you on again at some point in the future. And yeah,
sure.
See ya,
man.
Thanks for joining, everyone. Remember that our game Bow Path of the Teal Lotus launches on July 17th for all major platforms. If you want to stay connected, remember to wishlist us on Steam. The link for that will be in the description below. Hope to see everyone in the next episode.